The first time I saw it again, I thought the GPS was wrong, because there was no way this could still be mine. 1,200 acres of land don't just sit quietly for years without someone trying to rewrite the story. But there it was. Rusty iron gate, half-collapsed fencing stretching farther than the eye could comfortably follow, and a faded sign that used to say, Reed Family Estate. Now it just said, Private Community Property. My name is Daniel Carter, and I inherited something that was supposed to be simple. A lawyer's call, a stack of documents, a signature confirming I was the sole heir to my late uncle's estate. 1,200 acres of rural land in northern Texas. No HOA, no tenants, no complications. That's what they told me. They lied, because standing there on that cracked dirt road, I could already see it. Fresh pavement further inside the property. Uniform white fences. Security cameras mounted on poles that definitely weren't there when my uncle was alive. And worst of all, a small metal plaque near the entrance. Ridgewood Lakes Community Association. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed once, because it had to be a joke, right? You don't just rename 1,200 acres of private inheritance into a community. That's not how land ownership works. At least, not in reality. I stepped out of my truck. The air was dry, heavy, familiar. This land had been in my family for decades. My uncle used to tell me stories about it when I was a kid, about cattle that used to roam freely, about storms that shook the barns but never broke them, about silence so deep you could hear your own thoughts too clearly. Now, it felt different, like someone had put a fence around memory itself. I walked toward the gate, and that's when I noticed the first real problem. A keypad, brand new, digital, HOA-style access system, completely out of place. I pressed a cold button. A voice answered instantly. Too fast. Too rehearsed. Ridgewood Lakes Community Security. State your unit number. I paused. Unit number. A short silence. Then, this is private property access. Residents only. I'm not a resident, I said. I'm the owner. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a laugh. You're going to need to contact the HOA office for authorization. Click. They hung up. Just like that. I stood there for a moment, staring at a gate that now acted like it owned the land behind it. Not the other way around. That's when I heard footsteps. Not mine. Not mechanical. Real. Coming from inside the property. A man appeared behind the fence. Mid-40s. Clean polo shirt. Clipboard in hand. That familiar expression I was starting to recognize too quickly. The, you don't belong here look. Can I help you? He asked. I pointed behind him. That's my land. He didn't even hesitate. No, it isn't. That hit harder than it should have. Not because it was convincing, but because of how easily he said it. Like he'd said it before. I stepped closer. I inherited this property, I said. Legally, it was left to me in a will. He flipped his clipboard open. Didn't even look at me. This section is under Ridgewood Lakes HOA jurisdiction, he said casually. Private ownership rights are superseded by community governance. I actually laughed. Out loud this time. Community governance. I repeated. On 1,200 acres of rural inheritance. He finally looked up, annoyed, like I was wasting his time. Sir, he said slowly, this land has been converted into managed residential development. You need approval to enter. That word again. Converted. Something inside me shifted. Because this wasn't confusion. This was confidence. Fake confidence. But still confidence. Who'll approve that? I asked. He tapped his clipboard. HOA board resolution. I stared at him. You can't convert privately inherited land into a residential HOA without legal transfer. He smiled slightly. That's above my pay grade. Of course it was. I took a step back, looked at the land again. The cameras, the fences, the signs, the gate. Someone had been here, recently, and they had done more than trespass. They had reorganized reality on paper. I want to speak to whoever runs this, I said. He sighed, pulled out his phone. I'll notify management, he said. And then, before I could say anything else, a woman's voice came through the gate intercom. Sharp, controlled, confident. You are trespassing on restricted HOA property. I froze, and there she was, Linda Harper, HOA president. I didn't see her yet, but I could hear her clearly. This property was legally transferred into HOA management, she said. You are not authorized to be here. I stepped closer to the gate. I inherited this land, I said firmly. Show me the legal transfer. A pause. Then, a cold laugh. You're going to need a lawyer for that. Click. She cut the connection. And just like that, I realized something very important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a clerical error. This was control. Someone had taken 1,200 acres of inherited land and built an entire system on top of it, and they fully believed it was theirs. I looked at the gate one more time, then at the cameras watching me, then at the land behind them. All right, I muttered, if you want to play like this. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I knew who could start unraveling it, because whatever HOA thought this was, they had no idea who they just blocked out, and I wasn't leaving. The first call I made wasn't to a lawyer. It was to the county recorder's office, because if someone really transferred 1,200 acres into an HOA, there had to be a trail, deeds, filings, signatures, something real, something official. I stepped back into my truck and called a number I had on file. A woman answered after 2 rings. County Records Office. Hi, I said. I need verification on a property transfer. Ridgewood Lakes area, 1,200 acres under the Reed estate. A pause. Keyboard typing. I'm sorry, she said slowly. I'm not seeing any HOA transfer registered for that parcel. I blinked. Check again. I am, she replied. There's no subdivision filing, no HOA overlay, no ownership reassignment. My grip tightened on the phone. That's impossible, I said. There are gates, cameras, signage. People are actively living there. Another pause. Longer this time. Sir, she said carefully, none of that would be legally valid without recorded jurisdiction. That word hit hard. Jurisdiction. Because that was the lie they were building everything on. I ended the call, sat in silence for a moment, then looked back at the land. Something wasn't just wrong. Something had been constructed, and it had been constructed carefully. I called a second number, a private property attorney I had worked with years ago. Daniel, he answered. I need a sanity check, I said. I've got a property inheritance situation. HOA claims they control 1,200 acres. County says there's no record. There was a pause, then a low whistle. That's not how any of this works, he said immediately. I know. No HOA can absorb private rural estate land without recorded subdivision approval, he continued. That would require zoning change, public notice, signatures from heirs, and county approval. None of that happened, I said. Then legally, he replied, they don't exist on that land. I looked up again at the gate, at the cameras, at the polished sign that said Ridgewood Lakes Community Association. Then what is this? I asked. He hesitated. Either someone is committing large-scale fraud, he said slowly, or someone is operating like they think they have authority when they don't. A pause. Then he added, either way, don't go in alone. Too late for that advice. I was already there, and I was already being watched, because the moment I stepped out of the truck again, the intercom crackled. Still here? Linda's voice came through, calm, almost amused. I didn't answer immediately. I walked closer to the gate instead. I checked the county records. I said, silence. Then, a light laugh. Of course you did, she said. And there's no HOA jurisdiction. That changed the tone instantly. Not loud, not emotional, just colder. Records can be outdated, she replied. No, I said firmly. They are not. A pause. Longer this time. Then she said something that made everything worse. You don't understand how this community operates. I laughed. Then explain it. Another pause. You're standing on managed property, she said. That means rules apply regardless of inheritance claims. That's not how ownership works. It is HOA. That was the moment I realized something important. She wasn't pretending. She believed it. And that was more dangerous than fraud. Because fraud hides. Belief doesn't. I want proof, I said. You'll receive formal notice, she replied. For what? Violation of restricted access policy. I stared at the gate. You're issuing violations on land you don't legally control. A small pause. Then, you'll understand soon enough. Click. She cut the line again. I stood there for a long moment. When moving through the dry field behind the fence, cameras still pointed directly at me. Watching. Tracking. This wasn't just someone squatting. This wasn't just trespassing. This was structured control. Like they had built a system first and decided to find land later. I pulled out my phone again, opened the camera, and took photos. The gate, the sign, the cameras, the fencing, everything. Because if they wanted to play like this, I needed evidence. That's when a truck pulled up behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned. A man stepped out. Late 30s, work boots, property maintenance vest. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me. Sir, he said. Yeah. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. This is my land. He hesitated, looked back toward the property, then leaned in slightly. Just be careful, he said. That wasn't normal. Not for someone enforcing HOA rules. Why? I asked. He looked down, then back at me. Because people who ask too many questions don't get approved access around here. And then he got back in his truck and left. No explanation, no confrontation, just warning. I stood there again, watching the dust settle. And for the first time, I stopped thinking this was just about a fake HOA. This was bigger, a lot bigger, because whatever Ridgewood Lakes was, it didn't behave like a normal community. It behaved like something that expected obedience. And that meant one thing. They had done this before. I looked back at the gate one more time, then smiled slightly. Not because it was funny, because now I understood something very clearly. They didn't take my land. I didn't leave. That was the first decision I made. Because walking away would have meant accepting something I knew wasn't true. And I wasn't doing that. Not for them. Not for anyone. I stayed parked just outside the gate until late afternoon. Long enough for the sun to shift. Long enough for the cameras to adjust their angle a few times. Long enough to feel like I was being studied more than watched. Then the intercom clicked again, still refusing to leave. Linda's voice came through. Calm. Controlled. Almost bored. I stepped closer to the gate. I'm not leaving my property. A pause. Then a soft sigh. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. I laughed once. Short. Unimpressed. You're running a fake HOA on 1,200 acres, I said. I think you passed hard a long time ago. Silence. For the first time, no immediate response. Then, you'd be misinformed, she said. That word again. Misinformed. Like reality was optional. I spoke to the county, I said. There's no HOA registration, no zoning change, no subdivision approval, nothing. Another pause, longer this time, then a tone change, slightly, less polished, more personal. You don't understand what this place is, she said. I leaned closer to the gate, then explain it. A faint sound in the background, typing, footsteps, people moving. She wasn't alone. This property was placed under community management after long-term abandonment risk, she said carefully. Abandonment risk. I repeated, yes. That's not a legal term. It is in our system. That was the moment it clicked. Not a legal system. A private one. A closed one. A system that answered only to itself. You built your own authority, I said slowly. No, she replied immediately. We enforce existing community protections. On land you don't own. A pause. Ownership is more complicated than paperwork, she said. That line told me everything I needed to know. Because people who say that are never talking about law. They're talking about control. I stepped back slightly, looked at the cameras again. How many people live behind that gate? I asked. Silence. Then, that is not relevant. That means more than one. No answer. I smiled slightly, not because it was funny, because now I understood the scale. You didn't just squat on land, I said. You built a whole system inside it. A long pause. Then, you should leave while you still can. That wasn't a threat. It was advice, which made it worse. Oh, what? I asked. Silence again. Then her voice came back colder. Or you will be processed like any other unauthorized visitor. Processed. That word hit differently, because it didn't sound like enforcement. It sounded like procedure. I'm not a visitor, I said. I'm the owner. That claim is not recognized here. That line again. Not recognized here. Not valid. Not disputed. Just erased. I pulled my phone out. Started recording. Say that again, I said. No recording is permitted on HOA-managed property boundaries, she replied instantly. I laughed. This is outside your property. A pause. Longer. Then, not according to our boundary enforcement system. And that was the moment I realized something very important. They weren't just claiming land. They had redefined it. Digitally, operationally, psychologically. They had built a world where their version was the only version that mattered. I lowered my phone slightly, looked at the gate again. That's not going to hold, I said quietly. Silence. Then Linda spoke again. But this time, different, less confident, more careful. You are not the first person to challenge this structure, she said. That caught my attention. Oh, I replied. There were prior ownership disputes resolved through community arbitration. Show me one legal case. Silence. No answer. That was enough, because now I knew. They didn't operate through courts. They operated through pressure. I stepped closer to the gate again. Open it, I said. No. Simple. Immediate. No hesitation. That was her real language. Not explanations. Not justifications. Control. Behind the gate, I heard movement. Footsteps. Multiple people now. Not just her. You're not alone in there, I said. That is correct. Then let me speak to whoever else is involved. A pause. Then, you are not cleared for internal discussion. I exhaled slowly, looked at the land stretching behind her. 1,200 acres, hidden behind a gate that didn't belong there, controlled by people who didn't legally own it, and yet completely confident. I'm coming in, I said. That changed the air instantly. You will be trespassing, she replied. I already own it. Silence. Then her voice sharpened slightly. Then you will be removed. That word landed heavier than the rest. Removed, not arrested, not escorted. Removed. I stepped back from the gate, looked at the cameras one more time, and nodded slightly. All right, I said, if that's how you want to play it. I turned back toward my truck. Then I'll stop asking politely. And for the first time since I arrived, I heard something new over the intercom. Not her voice. A second voice. Low. Male. Close. She's not supposed to be handling this alone. Then silence. Click. The line went dead, and I smiled, because now I knew something else. Linda Harper wasn't the top of this system. She was just a face at the gate, and whatever was deeper inside that land. I had called a county sheriff, then a land attorney, then a state property investigator, and I waited, right there,